Welcome to 5 questions. Oh, wait a second. 5 points a day to ace PMP 2021 exams. This is volume 35. All right. What you should know that all these 5 points are taken from a rather comprehensively selling book at Amazon, in fact, all signs of Amazon, and it is called Ninja Notes. It's from my Read and Pass Notes publication, and these Ninja Notes for PMP exams 2021 are available in both Kindle and paperback format, and it's in complete color. In India and some other countries in Asia, it's only the Kindle version which is available, whereas the paperback is available in US, Japan, and Canada. And even that is available in full color. It's an interesting book and also a book that provides every single note that you would need to not only pass PMP exams, but also ace them. All right, let's move on. Point number one, let's look at Tuckmans Model. The name of the person is Bruce Tuckman. Basically, this model talks about how a team gets formed. So we have the very first stage called forming, followed by storming, followed by norming, followed by performing, and finally adjourning. Now, what kind of questions show up on PMP exams connected to this? Well, one thing is sure that you will get at least 2 and maybe 3 questions in PMP exams when it comes to Tuckman's model. Now, the questions are always something like this. Either they will give a situation, a scenario. Hey, your team is actually very cohesive. They are doing very well. They are solving their own problems. Their productivity is pretty good. And therefore, basically, and then the question is, based on the scenario, what is the stage of Tuckman's ladder? Sometimes it's called Tuckman's ladder. Sometimes it's called Tuckman's model. So which stage of Tuckman's ladder or model your team is currently at? And if you look at it, if your team is performing, they are working well, they're gelling well, and they can solve their own conflicts, that means they are at performing level. However, if it says that, well, they have beginning to come together, they have beginning to see some acceptance towards each other, there's improved tolerance, a certain amount of team cohesion is happening, they begin to share goals. Well, that is not performing, that is norming, that is just after storming. They have begun to accept each other, they have begun to understand each other, they've begun to realize that, hey man, we have to work with these people, and they are normalizing. So they are in the stage of norming, right? So know the difference very clearly, because that's the kind of questions that will show up, right? And then you have storming, where there is all conflicts, misunderstandings, cultural shocks, reality setting in. And forming is when you just come together, right? You have guarded optimism, you are being overtly polite. So forming is the very first stage, followed by storming. You cannot override storming, but you should try to limit the duration of storming so that you can get to norming faster. After norming, you get performing. This is where you have productivity. But then what is adjourning? If you're already come together very well, then what is the concept of adjourning? Well, if your team has come together very well, they've been doing a great job, then towards the end of the project, you have this separation anxiety. You have this kind of a feel, wow, man, I hope I can work with this team again. So that's the whole point. So adjourning, they never ask you a question in PMP exam, because that's not really a ladder, that's a stage after, having a great team. So that's just something. Most of the questions, in fact, not most, all of your questions will be either on forming, storming, norming, or performing. So remember what these each stand for. That's how the questions will show up in PMP exams. All right, let's move to point number 2. You see, a lot of questions in PMP exams, particularly when it comes to coming to consensus, if there is a scenario about consensus, or when we talk about prioritization of requirements, particularly for Agile, you have to get involved with polling and basically voting. Now, voting can be of 2 kinds. One is polling. Polling is what we do in democracies. One person, one vote. So if there are multiple options, you can only give one vote. You have to choose, hey, this is for this particular requirement is the best for me. That's it. But you see, in a professional environment, sometimes polling just doesn't cut it, because you have many options. If there are just 3 or 4 options to choose from, your polling will work. Remember, polling is one person, one vote. But if you have a lot of variety of choices, then you would want to distribute your vote. And in order to distribute your vote, you need to have more than one vote to vote in the first place. And that is either called cluster voting. In some circles, it is also called 100 votes, where each of the persons are provided 100 votes, and they can share it based on, they can put 20 votes in one requirements, 40 votes somewhere else, and distribute their multiple votes. And once you count the votes at the end for each of the requirements, you get to know, which is the highest priority and which is the second priority and so on. So that is called dot voting. That means you can have multiple dots. Each person will be provided multiple dots. And then those guys with different colored dots can simply post it on these multiple choices. Here we have something to do with food, my favorite subject. But well, that's just an example, but you can use it for anything, for prioritization of requirements, to selection of an idea, or the prioritization of a decision. It could be for anything. So dot voting is also called cluster voting, which is one person, multiple votes, where a person can distribute their votes over multiple choices. So remember the difference. All right, let's move on to point number 3. It has something to do with emotional intelligence. In fact, what we need to understand about emotional intelligence is that you will get 3 to 4 questions in PMP exams connected to emotional intelligence. But when we talk about emotional intelligence, always remember, since it's a tool and technique of manage team, most of your questions will be connected to emotional intelligence from the point of view of conflict handling or managing teams. But sometimes they do ask questions about the content of emotional intelligence. What does it really mean? So in order to answer that, you need to know that emotional intelligence has 2 major parts. One is personal, which is directed to self, and the other one is impersonal, interpersonal side, which is directed to others. Now, in order to be good at emotional intelligence, you need to address yourself first, which is you need to be aware about your own emotions. You have to regulate your emotions so that you don't run away with your emotions, and you need to have some motivation to continued regulation of your emotions. So 3 aspects of personal side: self-awareness, self-regulation, and motivation to continue self-regulation. Once you've been able to control yourself, then you can look at understanding others. And that is the interpersonal side. Understand how to deal with people, general public, social skills, and have the empathy to understand why others are behaving in the manner they are. And this way, you become a better leader and you're able to better handle conflicts. Remember, emotional intelligence, two sides to it: personal side and the interpersonal side. Personal side is made up of 3 steps: self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation. And the interpersonal side is social skills and empathy. All right, let's move on to point number 4. Now, sometimes in 2021, what has happened, there are a lot of questions which are showing up for personality assessments. The questions are very simple. They simply talk about, you need to understand who are the best suited for your team, right? What is the different kind of personalities your team members have? What is the personality assessment of your team members? So whenever you have these kind of scenarios, you need to understand that the options would have some tools mentioned. Some of the most common tools for personality assessment are theory of psychological types, Myers-Briggs types indicator, which is MBTI, DISC model or DISC model, true colors methodology, social style model, whole brain thinking, Bulbin theory. But to be very honest, so far, the maximum number of times they've asked about personality assessment, they have talked about Myers-Briggs type indicator, MBTI. So either they'll say, hey, as a team, you've hired a consultant and they're trying to implement Myers-Briggs type indicator. What is it that they're doing? Well, you look at the option which talks about something to do with personality assessment. That's your correct answer, or suitability of the team members in the current project or the scenario. Basically, it's meant for that. Right? Or if the question is about a scenario that you have a group of people. You need to figure out it's a very important project. You need the team to come together, which is made up of people with different styles of working. Which is the best tool or technique that you can use? Which of the following could you use to, figure out who the right candidates are? And the answer is, well, Myers-Briggs type indicator or any of these other mentioned there. Or sometimes they simply talk about, they don't write any of these tools mentioned here. They simply write personality assessment tool. That also is an option that they provide. But you need to keep in mind the most popular one is MBTI, Myers-Briggs type indicator. Right? All right, let's move on to the very last point, and that is active listening. Now, a lot of questions do show up nowadays, particularly in 2021, is active listening. Now, what is active listening? Active listening are of multiple kinds. Active listening, first of all, means that to be able to understand person very well by paying full attention and letting the other person know that you are paying attention. That is active listening. But now what has happened is the questions are now starting to be asked about different varieties or kinds of active listening. And what kind of question do they ask? Well, they'll give you a scenario that, you're talking to one of your managers, and the manager, after listening to you very carefully, has repeated or summarized what you've just said. What kind of active listening is your manager engaging in? And the correct answer is reflecting. So let's look at these different varieties of active listening. One is called reflecting. It means repeating a gist of message to clarify understanding or situation, basically summarizing towards the end and verifying, hey, did I understand that correctly? Is this what you're trying to say? Well, that is reflecting. So they actually give you a scenario and you'll have to figure out, okay, this is what they're talking about. Second is attending. This is more of a visual indicator. So you have to probably give nonverbal signs that you are actually paying attention, like maintaining an eye contact, leaning forward, folding your hands in front of you and, looking straight in the person's eyes. That gives the other person a clear indication that you are paying attention. So that's another scenario that may show up on PMP exam, and therefore they'll ask you, hey, which kind of active listening are you engaged in? And the answer is attending. Now the other one, the third one, is following, which means demonstrating understanding of message or situation through, hand gesture, simply saying, hey, okay, now I understand, just giving hand gestures, or sometimes just nodding your head up and down that you do understand. Verbal affirmations like, oh, yes. All right, what happened then? Those kind of things, like asking open-ended questions. Okay, then what happened? So basically, when the scenario question talks any of these things and then asks you, okay, what kind of active listening are you engaged in? And the answer is following. All right, this brings us to the end. Well, go ahead and subscribe and make sure that you press the notification bell so that you don't miss out anything. If you have any question, do let me know. I'll be more than happy to engage with you and answer your questions. And since PM Pulse never engages in paid promotion whatsoever, we request you to go ahead and share our videos with others. All right. Thank you for watching and the very best of luck for your PMP exams. Catch you later.